History is more than dates and facts. It's a living tapestry of human experiences. Join me tonight as we unravel its threads and escape into a world long gone. You're not on solid land anymore. The deck rocks gently beneath your boots, and the scent of salt clings to everything like a second skin. Lanterns sway softly in the breeze as you gather with the crew, each face weathered and watchful. The moon is full, casting an almost silver wash over the sea's inky surface. You're aboard a pirate ship, but not the lawless madhouse you might imagine. No, tonight you'll learn that pirates, for all their chaos and crimes, had a kind of order, rules, even something like democracy. And yes, you probably wouldn't survive this world. Not a chance, really. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And post your location and local time. I always love seeing where you're listening from. Wherever you are, I hope tonight brings you rest, comfort, and maybe a curious dream or two. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across the weathered planks of the quarterdeck, squinting toward the distant glimmer of land, though it's probably just fog and imagination. Beside you, a pirate leans on the rail, chewing a hunk of dried fish and grumbling about the vote. At first, you think he means politics back home, some faraway governor or an admiral's decision. But no, he's talking about tonight's vote, whether the captain stays or walks the plank. Wait, vote. Yes, pirates didn't just appoint a captain for life. They elected them. And they could fire them too. It's called pirate democracy, and it's the kind of thing that makes modern HR departments look a little primitive. On most ships, the crew elected the captain by majority vote. If he made poor choices, got too greedy, or lost too many battles, he could be ousted just as easily. No campaign ads, no debates, just a mutinous vote of no confidence and boom, new boss. It wasn't total anarchy, though. Each ship had two main authorities, the captain who made quick decisions during battle or pursuit, and the quartermaster who acted more like a union rep. The quartermaster oversaw daily discipline, divided loot, settled disputes, and kept the captain from turning into a tyrant. They balanced each other in a salty dance of checks and balances. The crew, they were the electorate, and they didn't need a fancy pollster to tell them if things weren't going well. The result was a bizarre, seafaring meritocracy. You didn't inherit your power, you earned it with bravery, fairness, and a knack for not getting your ship blown out of the water. Some of the most famous captains like Edward Lowe and Black Bart Roberts were elected this way. Black Bart even insisted on weekly reports to the crew like some 18th century newsletter. Today, in pirate news, our plunder total is up 23% from last week. Jenkins lost his leg again, and the Spanish galleon is late to the party. Historians still argue whether this system was truly democratic or just a practical way to keep the peace among dangerous men with loaded pistols. Was it a proto-republic or merely crowd control? The truth is probably somewhere in between. Even more oddly, the pirate code? Yes, the real one, not just what Jack Sparrow mutters about, sometimes included term limits for certain ship roles. One crew allowed their quartermaster to serve only until the next successful raid. If he botched it, someone else got a turn. Another ship voted on all major decisions, including when to eat. Now imagine trying to run a dinner party like that. It gets weirder. Captains couldn't even order punishments without a crew vote on some ships. Floggings, maroonings, even small fines required discussion and majority approval. Pirates, it turns out, were extremely committed to consensus when they weren't, robbing merchants blind. And it wasn't just about structure, it was survival. Life at sea was brutal. Disease, injury, starvation, and sudden storms made the average voyage a test of endurance. Add in treasure disputes and violent tempers, and you've got a recipe for mutiny every Tuesday. Democracy helped calm that storm. When pirates felt heard, they were less likely to solve problems with cutlasses. Of course, there were exceptions. Some pirate crews functioned more like dictatorships, especially when fearsome figures like Blackbeard or Charles Vane were in charge. But even then, those captains knew they walked a thin line. Push too hard, take too much, or lose too many battles, and the crew would talk. Whispers would start. One day you'd wake up and your first mate would be holding a vote behind your back. Aye for replacement, nay for death. Quick now he's armed. And sometimes when things got really tense, a new captain was installed in the middle of a battle. Imagine that, dodging cannonballs while debating leadership reform. Captain Roberts, you're out. Jenkins, you're in. Now steer left before we all die. You'd think that pirates infamous for their wildness and disorder would reject such an organized idea. But this structure is what allowed them to succeed, even thrive. Their systems created loyalty, cohesion, and sometimes even longevity. Some pirate crews sailed together for years without collapsing into chaos. Not bad for criminals with scurvy and no deodorant. And if you're wondering what the vote looked like, it varied. Some crews scratched marks into wood. Others used colored pebbles. One ship reportedly had a ceremonial sword passed around, and whoever tapped it chose aye or nay before tossing a bone dice into a bucket. But sometimes tradition skipped the formalities. If the crew hated you enough, they might just toss you overboard mid-snore. Let's call that an expedited ballot. As the sea wind curls around your face and a bell clangs above deck, you picture the crew gathering again for a vote, not about taxes or policies, but about who gets to wear the captain's coat. Maybe it's you, or maybe you're already halfway to marooned. The air smells like salt sweat and something vaguely roasted, possibly fish. Possibly someone's sock left too close to the lantern. You shift your weight on the creaky planks as the quartermaster calls roll, not for battle this time, but for distribution. No, not of chores or orders, but of treasure. This is where things get interesting. You're about to learn that pirates, those rum-swilling, dagger-hurling rebels of the sea, were oddly committed to something astonishingly modern pay equity. Forget the idea that the captain sailed away with the lion's share while the rest starved on crumbs. On most pirate ships, loot was divided based on strict shares often written into an agreed-upon code. It wasn't socialism, but it was a form of financial fairness rare for the brutal 18th century seas. And it probably worked better than most of your freelance contracts. Here's how it played out. Captains usually received 2 shares of any loot. Quartermasters got 1.5. Everyone else from the gunner to the powder monkey typically got 1 share each. The cook. He got a share too, especially if his stew didn't kill anyone. Not exactly equal, but certainly more level than the rigid naval systems where officers lived like kings while sailors barely survived. And here's a little twist: if you lost a limb in service to the crew, an arm, a leg, even a finger, you were compensated. Seriously. Some ships included detailed compensation charts in their codes. A leg might earn you 800 pieces of 8 and I-100. Pirates were literally running an early form of health insurance, albeit with more blood and fewer deductibles. Historians still argue whether this compensation was genuinely altruistic or simply a way to keep morale high and discourage desertion. Either way, pirates valued their injured mates and wanted them to have something to retire on, even if that retirement usually meant opening a bar in Port Royal and losing all their silver in 2 weeks. Now, picture it: the spoils of a raid laid out in glittering piles, gold doubloons, bolts of silk, barrels of spice, and sometimes even livestock. It's not just about cash. A few chickens could be worth more than a necklace, depending on how many eggs they laid. The crew gathers, eyes gleaming, and the quartermaster begins the division ceremony. Each pirate steps forward to claim his share. Some boast loudly, others quietly slip away with their pouch of coins. The loot is divided in full view, no backroom deals, no service fees. If someone tries to sneak extra, they're caught and fined. And by fined, I mean tied to the mast for public humiliation with a carrot stuck in their hat. Or worse, made to swab the latrines for a week without complaint. But there were quirks in the system. New recruits often got partial shares, half or even a quarter, until they'd proven their worth. And the ship's musicians, if there were any, sometimes received an extra portion, especially if they kept spirits high during a storm or after a bloody fight. Yes, morale had a pay rate. On some ships, pirates pooled together a community fund. This money wasn't for beer or cannonballs, it was saved for injured crewmates' funerals, or helping a pirate's family if he died. Think of it like a pirate co-op, or the sea's most dangerous GoFundMe. One famous example, the crew of Henry Morgan. After a successful raid, they divided treasure down to the ounce and even weighed gold teeth if someone got too greedy. Morgan himself kept a ledger, possibly the least piratey thing imaginable, and cross-checked claims. Yes, pirates could be that meticulous. You might have needed an abacus just to keep up. Of course not. Every crew was fair. Some captains, especially in the later golden age of piracy, were downright tyrannical. Captain Kidd, for example, kept so much loot for himself that his crew threatened mutiny. In contrast, Bartholomew Roberts was beloved partly because of how precisely and publicly he split the spoils. Fairness built loyalty. Greed got you tossed in the brig. Or the ocean. A fringe tidbit for you. Some pirate ships offered bonuses for bravery. You charged first during a raid. You got a little extra. Took down a ship's mast with a single cannon shot. Bonus round. It was a dangerous game with incentive pay one, where performance review meant not dying and maybe getting a better hammock. And now, something stranger still. There were even cases of pirates gifting part of their earnings to local island communities, either out of gratitude, superstition, or in exchange for future shelter. One crew reportedly donated spices and silver to a Caribbean village that had once warned them of an approaching navy. Pirate mutual aid, not as rare as you'd think. That said, many of these systems depended on one fragile thing: trust. If a captain hoarded too much or the quartermaster miscounted, it didn't take long before knives came out, and the next election was held over a barrel of gunpowder. Pirate justice could be swift and loud. So tonight, as you picture the flickering lanterns and the hush of the crowd gathering for payday, imagine your name being called. You step forward, pouch open. A small stack of coins, a sliver of sapphire, maybe a wedge of spiced cake from the ship's raid on a merchant galley. Not riches perhaps, but enough. Enough to buy a new coat, a better dagger, and just maybe some peace. And you know what? In a world where most sailors were lucky to be paid at all, that kind of fairness was downright revolutionary. Especially when it came with a free parrot. You wake to the caw of gulls and the slosh of water beneath wooden planks. But something feels off. The ship is too quiet. Too still. You sit up slowly only to find a small sack beside you, your belongings a pistol with one shot, a flask of rum. And nothing else. Congratulations, you've just been marooned. This wasn't just some piratey tall tale. Marooning was very real, and it was as cruel as it was theatrical. Pirates didn't always keel-haul the traders or slit throats in alleyways. Sometimes when a crew member broke the sacred code, they were abandoned, alone, on an island, with no boat, and usually no food either. Just you, the sand, and the thought. Well, that escalated quickly. The punishment was known across the seas, but pirates gave it flair. They might leave you with a pistol loaded to give you, shall we say, a merciful exit option. That's right. The pirates left you a choice. Die slow or die fast. Friendly bunch. Historians still argue whether marooning was used frequently or if it was more of a threat, a performance designed to instill fear and keep order. Some say it happened rarely. Others insist it was a favorite punishment, especially among Democratic crews who wanted to avoid outright murder. After all, if you vote to maroon someone, you're not a killer. You're just enforcing pirate HR policy. Some of the most famous maroonings in pirate history border on the absurd. Take Alexander Selkirk, a Scottish sailor who argued with his captain and was dumped on an uninhabited island off the Chilean coast. He survived alone for 4 years, eating goats, taming cats, and going slightly bonkers. His story inspired Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe, though Selkirk never got royalties because pirates aren't great at literary licensing. Then there's Edward England, a relatively gentlemanly pirate captain. He famously refused to kill captured sailors and often let them go, but when his crew grew tired of his mercy, they marooned him instead. On an island off Mauritius, he survived barely and eventually made it back to civilization, though without much sympathy from the pirates who had voted him off the proverbial island. In some cases, marooned pirates were picked up days later after learning their lesson. It was a scare tactic, a hazing ritual, and yes, occasionally a form of justice. If you stole from your crewmates, disobeyed direct orders, or simply annoyed the wrong person at the wrong time, the beach might become your new bedroom. There are fringe tales of marooned pirates building elaborate camps, creating sand-based help signs visible from sea, and even attempting to swim to passing ships. One rumor involves a marooned sailor who constructed a working signal fire system using turtle oil, which sounds improbable but delightfully ambitious. Still, the psychological toll was real. Imagine waking each morning not knowing whether your crew might return, or whether that speck on the horizon is a ship or a cruel mirage. Food runs low. The pistol feels heavier. You talk to a crab and name it Reginald. By day 7, Reginald is your therapist. Pirate codes often specified marooning as the penalty for desertion, betrayal, or theft. But captains also used it to settle grudges. Sometimes all it took was an accusation and a majority vote. Pirate justice didn't always come with an appeal process, especially if your loud snoring or off-key singing had driven everyone mad during the last storm. But marooning wasn't always a death sentence. Some pirates chose exile, especially if they were injured or tired of life at sea. They'd ask to be left on a familiar island where they had connections or where other outlaws had formed small communities. A sort of pirate retirement village, if you will, with coconuts, hammocks, and passive-aggressive neighbors. And now for something bizarre, there were stories likely exaggerated of pirates faking their own maroonings to escape capture or start a new life. One tale involves a man who convinced his crew to leave him behind, then reappeared 3 years later in fancy clothes claiming to have become a spice merchant in India. Was it true? Probably not. But pirates loved a good rebrand. There's even some evidence that marooned pirates left carved messages on trees or rocks, hoping future ships would spot them. A few such carvings have been found: cryptic initial symbols and odd phrases like, "Jenny took my shoes." Was Jenny a ship? A lover? A pet monkey? Historians are still scratching their heads. And then there's the curious case of the marooning bluff. A few clever pirates use the threat of marooning to extract confessions. Tell us where you hid the jewels, or you'll be vacationing on Skull Island with nothing but a moldy compass. It usually worked. People tend to be very chatty when facing crab-infested solitude. As the sun sets over the gentle curve of some forgotten Caribbean shore, imagine yourself sitting cross-legged in the sand, watching your former ship disappear into the orange haze. You sip the rum slowly, it's warm and a little salty but comforting. The pistol rests in your lap, unused. You're not ready for that yet. Maybe the tide will change, maybe Reginald will bring friends, or maybe this exile will become something else entirely. Some pirates found madness in isolation, others found peace. You You lie back, let the sand cool your skin, and drift into a deep, dreamless sleep, the sound of waves humming like lullabies. The wind picks up just as the lookout yells something unintelligible from above. Probably sail, but it's hard to hear over the thudding of your own heartbeat. You and the rest of the crew scramble to your positions. Cannon lids creak open, flintlocks are checked. And then someone shouts, "Raise the colors!" But not just any flag, the Jolly Roger. You've seen it before, skull and crossbones black background, terrifying in its simplicity. But tonight you learn that this macabre little emblem wasn't just there to look edgy. It was a tactical psychological weapon, and pirates treated it with deep, almost superstitious reverence. The Jolly Roger wasn't a universal design. Pirates personalized it, often choosing or commissioning their own version. Blackbeard, ever the theatrical soul, flew a black flag, showing a horned skeleton holding an hourglass and a spear stabbing a bleeding heart. Subtle right. Bartholomew Roberts had a different vibe. His showed him toasting death. Meanwhile, Edward Lowe went all in with a red skeleton on a black background, grinning like he knew where your gold was buried. There was no industry standard, only pure intimidation. And if your flag game was weak, well, so was your reputation. Here's the thing, flying. The Jolly Roger was often a final warning. Pirates didn't start with it. They usually approached flying a false flag, Spanish, British, French, whatever got them close without a fight. Then at the last moment, they'd hoist the Jolly Roger. It was their way of saying, this is your last chance to surrender before things get messy. And it worked. A merchant ship that saw the skull and crossbones suddenly appear from a seemingly friendly vessel, often panicked and surrendered on the spot. Not because they feared death, though that was part of it, but because the Jolly Roger told them these aren't just thieves. These are organized, violent, and theatrical thieves who know exactly how long you'll scream. Historians still argue whether Jolly Roger comes from Joli Rouge French, for pretty red, possibly referencing blood and the original red flags used by buccaneers. Or it might be a play on Old Roger, a nickname for the devil. Either way, there's nothing particularly jolly about it. And yes, red flags were a thing. Known as the no quarter flag, the red banner signaled no mercy. If you saw a black flag, you might live. If you saw a red one, best start praying or swimming, or both. But pirates didn't just use flags for drama. There were rules, a strange, unspoken etiquette of flags. For instance, some captains had parley flags signaling they wanted to negotiate. Others carried signal flags to communicate mid-attack. Raise one square white cloth and you might be calling for surrender. Two red triangles, you're ready to fire. These signals were kind of language, and crews drilled with them. Because when you're in the middle of a cannon broadside, you don't want to rely on shouting. You want symbols, movement, coordination. You want to scare your enemies and calm your allies, and you want your flags to do half the talking. A fringe tidbit for you. There's a theory that some pirate flags glowed faintly at night, made with fish oils or treated fabrics that caught moonlight in eerie ways. Imagine being a sailor on night watch and seeing a faint skull emerge from the blackness. Not a bad way to cause a panic. And then there's the case of silent flags, raised upside down or stitched in reverse to send secret signals to crew members. One story tells of a mutiny that was coordinated entirely through subtle flag movements. When the captain raised his personal banner, Inverted and tied with a green ribbon, the crew knew it was time. Flags were more than flair. They were branding like a corporate logo soaked in fear and fish guts. If your flag was famous enough, you didn't need to fire a shot. The myth did the work. Some pirate crews cultivated reputation as much as they did firepower. A merchant ship might resist a no-name brig, but if they saw Black Bart's flag, they'd surrender the cargo and help load it into your hold. One peculiar example, Captain Emmanuel Wynne, who is often credited with flying the first documented Jolly Roger around 1700. His flag included a skull crossbones and an hourglass, a reminder that time was running out. Very considerate, really. There were even flag rituals. Before battle, some pirates gathered on deck to bless the colors touching them, spitting on them for luck or whispering threats to the wind. Some cut themselves slightly and smeared a bit of blood on the canvas. Others tossed a coin into the sea, asking the ocean to honor the flag's promise. And on rare occasions, the flag was burned after a major defeat to erase the shame or to retire a captain's reign. This was considered deeply symbolic, like throwing a sword into a lake or deleting your social media account after an embarrassing post. Modern pop culture has turned the Jolly Roger into kitsch, plastered on mugs, t-shirts, and Halloween costumes. But at the time, it was a psychological masterstroke. A pirate's version of propaganda. Not just a warning, but a brand identity that said, "We are many, we are brutal, and we are watching." So next time you see that cheeky little skull fluttering on someone's hoodie, remember, it once meant something very serious. It meant fear. It meant legend. It meant the end was very, very close. And on this quiet night, as your ship drifts under a sky full of stars and stories, the black flag flutters above you like a whisper, a promise, a threat, a shadow in the wind. The storm has passed. The sea is calm again, and so is the ship, though not in silence. Below deck, the sounds drift through the timbers, humming laughter, a crude song about a goat and a cannon, and something metallic clinking in rhythm. You make your way down the ladder, stepping into a dim lantern glow, and immediately freeze. Half the crew is tattooing each other. Welcome to the strange ink-stained world of pirate aesthetics. Forget the Hollywood image of pirates being rugged but mostly clean-skinned. In truth, many were absolutely covered in tattoos and piercings. And unlike today's aesthetic choices, these weren't about rebellion or Instagram clout. They were deeply personal, symbolic, and occasionally medicinal. Yes, you're about to learn that some pirates believed tattoos helped to prevent disease. And no, the science wasn't great. One of the earliest historical mentions of pirates and tattoos comes from journals written by sailors and captives. They described pirates with anchors on their arms, mermaids on their chests, or crosses inked across their hands. Many pirates visited Polynesian islands or parts of Southeast Asia where tattooing was already an ancient art, and they adopted it both as cultural exchange and sailor superstition. A common design. The nautical star meant to guide a sailor home. Others tattooed the name of their ship or even their shares from the last loot, etched in Roman numerals. It's like walking around with your bank balance on your bicep. Historians still argue whether tattoos served a formal identification purpose like a seafaring passport, or whether it was just fashion that happened to involve needles, soot, and a lot of pain. But pirates weren't just stabbing themselves for decoration. They believed that certain tattoos brought luck, or warded off death. Some even had a cross tattooed on their feet, thinking it would keep sharks away. Not proven, but still hope dies last. Piercings were also part of the mix. Golden earrings weren't just for flair, they were insurance policies. Literally. Sailors believed that if they drowned and their bodies washed up on shore, the earrings' value would pay for a Christian burial. A bit grim, but surprisingly practical. There's even fringe evidence that some pirates wore earrings carved with navigational markings like miniature compasses or latitude notches. Others swore the metal improved eyesight. Spoiler, it didn't, but beliefs at sea rarely waited for scientific consensus, and sometimes tattoos carried darker stories. Prisoners marked themselves with the names of their captors or the date they were marooned. One tale tells of a pirate who tattooed "No Gods Here" on his own chest after surviving a shipwreck and watching his crew perish. Whether he became a nihilist or just had a bad week is unclear. Ink wasn't always black either. Some pirates used gunpowder, crushed seashells, or even rust mixed with lemon juice to create red, green, or bluish tints. Sounds painful. That's because it was. No anesthetic, no clean needles, just a sharpened fishbone, an old rag, and someone telling you to hold still or lose an eyebrow. You might imagine tattooing as a wild free-for-all, but in some crews there was a system. Certain marks were earned after a successful raid, a near-death experience, or the survival of disease. A pirate recovering from yellow fever might get a small sun symbol to mark the event. If you survived your third flogging, that earned a band around your arm. Basically, pirate tattoos were their resume, pain included. Even more curiously, there were secret tattoos, hidden under clothing or inked with invisible pigments that only darkened under salt water. Some designs were ritualistic, done during moonlit ceremonies involving chants, sea shanties, and the occasional roasted goat. Whether these ceremonies were genuinely mystical or just an excuse to skip chores is still debated. Pirates also marked each other as clan loyalty. If two crewmates had matching symbols, it signified a bond stronger than friendship, more like a brotherhood. Some of these were blood ink tattoos made using each other's blood mixed into the pigment. Gross, very. But in pirate circles, that counted as affection. On one, infamous ship crew members tattooed the captain's name backwards across their shoulder blades as a sign of eternal loyalty. When the captain was later ousted, they burned the letters off. Friendship goals, 1720s style. Some tattoos told entire stories of battle from beginning to end, inked across the back or chest in panels like a comic strip. One pirate reportedly had a map of all his raids drawn across his arms. When captured, he tried to chew off his own elbow to erase a location. He failed, but the Royal Navy was very impressed with the detail. And then there was the pirate surgeon. That's right. Tattooing didn't always happen in the corner of a smelly barracks. Some ships had semi-professional tattooists, usually the same person who doubled as cook doctor or resident herb enthusiast. They'd boil seawater, mix soot with alcohol, and use bone pins sterilized over fire. Medical grade, no, but by pirate standards, practically spa-level hygiene. A few designs were even thought to heal wounds. One old sailor claimed that tattooing a blue X near an infected leg drew out the poison. Another insisted that 3 dots under the eye cured seasickness. Spoiler, it didn't. But belief at sea had its own power. If the tattoo didn't help, the placebo might. As the night deepens and the tattooing slows, you watch one pirate finish a new piece on another's forearm, a crude octopus wrapped around an anchor. The ink is still fresh, the skin swollen. The man grins proudly, claps his friend on the back, and downs a celebratory gulp of grog. His face already bears a dozen marks, each one a badge of something survived. And as you sit among them, watching the candlelight dance across decorated skin, you realize that pirates didn't just mark themselves for fun. They were building stories, writing legends, leaving proof that they had lived, fought, loved, and somehow against every odd survived. It's a balmy night, the kind where the sea breathes gently against the hull, and the stars seem to hang lower closer. A few hammocks creak with shifting bodies above but below deck in a quieter corner. Behind the stacked rum barrels, something unexpected is happening. Two pirates sit side by side, knees nearly touching, sharing a quiet laugh. One wears a fraying vest, the other a striped sash. They're not just shipmates tonight, you learn there's something more. And not in a scandalous way, but in a contractual, entirely pirate kind of way. They are matelots. Matelotage, from the French matelot meaning sailor, was a quasi-marital arrangement practiced among pirates in the Caribbean. These weren't legally binding marriages in any traditional sense, but they often included shared property, mutual caregiving, and inheritance rights. In short, pirate domestic partnerships at sea centuries before legal systems recognized the concept. And while some of these relationships were romantic, many were purely practical. Imagine sailing with someone for months or years. You fight together, bleed together, steal mangoes together. Eventually, you form a bond that says, if I get skewered by a cannonball, you get my gold and my parrot. Historians still argue whether matelotage was primarily economic romantic or something between. Was it born out of necessity, isolation affection? Some scholars believe it was a proto-form of same-sex marriage. Others see it as a shipboard survival mechanism, a way to guarantee someone had your back when the cannon smoke cleared. But one thing's certain, matelotage was recognized and respected among many pirate crews. Agreements were often witnessed, sometimes even written down. And if one partner died, the surviving matelot received their share of treasure weapons and even clothing. The code was clear: what's yours is mine, and what's mine is yours, until a Spanish galleon tears us apart. The practice was most common in places like Tortuga and Portape, pirate-friendly havens in the 1600s and early 1700s, where ships from all over docked for repairs, resupply, and yes, companionship. Some matelots met on land, formed a bond, and then requested to be placed on the same ship. Others found each other at sea, usually after surviving a bloody encounter or sharing a particularly good flask of rum. Fringe tidbit for you. There are records of jealous quarrels between matelots, leading to duels, stolen hammocks, or passive-aggressive fiddle-playing during meals. One captain reportedly had to intervene when a trio of matelots, yes, a love triangle, threatened to derail an entire raid over who got to share the only clean blanket. But matelotage wasn't only about affection, it was also about economic stability. Remember, pirates didn't exactly have pensions. Forming a partnership meant someone would care for your possessions, protect your loot, and handle funeral matters if you drowned, exploded, or got eaten by a shark. Realistically, all three were equally likely. And pirates weren't always choosy about gender. Women occasionally sailed disguised as men, and sometimes not disguised at all. If they earned their place aboard and held their own, the crew didn't care much who bunked with whom. Identity on pirate ships was often far more fluid than back on land. Take Anne Bonny and Mary, read two of the most famous female pirates in history. Both wore men's clothing at sea and fought ferociously. It's said they formed deep relationships with male crewmates and possibly each other, though the details are shrouded in legend, rum, and centuries of awkward storytelling. But one thing's clear: pirate life didn't follow society's script. One ship's code even included a clause about companionship pairings, an open acknowledgement that two pirates might share living quarters, rations, and spoils regardless of blood or marital status. Not bad for an era where some countries still outlawed left-handedness. And when a ship docked, matlots often rented quarters together, shared profits at local taverns, and even bought matching clothes or jewelry. Some refer to each other as brothers to outsiders, but Among the crew, the nature of the bond was well understood. You don't draw swords for just anyone. Occasionally, Matalots retired together, purchasing land or opening taverns under shared names. One duo in Nassau opened a rum shop called Two Mass and No Wife, which either meant they were lifelong sea dogs or deeply committed to each other and really into nautical metaphors. Of course, not everyone approved. Some captains discouraged such pairings, fearing they led to favoritism or compromised discipline. And in rare cases, jealous Matalots betrayed rivals or stole from their partners, leading to duels that usually ended with someone losing a toe or a parrot. But more often than not, these sea-bound unions were stable and respected. They helped build trust in a world that chewed up alliances and spat out betrayal like salt water. So tonight, as the hammock sways and the candlelight flickers, imagine two pirates sharing a quiet moment. They've faced storms, mutinies, and unpronounceable diseases. They've buried treasure, lied to governors, and written their own code. And now they sit shoulder to shoulder, passing a dented flask and laughing at the absurdity of it all. Not because they're rebellious, but because in a world with no rules, they wrote their own. Above deck, the night is quiet, but below, just past the galley, something remarkable is happening. A circle of pirates has formed around a makeshift stage built from stacked crates and overturned barrels. One pirate in a feathered hat is juggling oranges. Another strums a battered mandolin off-key but enthusiastic. And at the center of it, all wearing a mop for a wig and a smudged beard painted on with charcoal, is someone reciting a dramatic monologue from a play you definitely didn't expect to hear at sea. Yes, pirates had theater nights. Forget the nonstop chaos of cannon fire and rum-fueled plundering. Life aboard a pirate ship included something many overlook: entertainment. Music performances, storytelling, and yes, even full-blown shipboard theater were all part of the rhythm of life at sea. Because when you're adrift for weeks between raids with nothing but hardtack and sea lice, you'll watch anything, even Jenkins performing Hamlet. And while some performances were planned, others were spontaneous. Crews would designate an evening, especially after a successful plunder, or a long dry spell, as a time to unwind. Out came the instruments, the grog, the worst singing voices you've ever heard, and occasionally a sock puppet show featuring two parrots and a cardboard sword. It was chaos, but it was community. One pirate ship reportedly carried a performance box, a chest filled with costumes, wigs, face paint, and a cracked spyglass used as a fake monocle. The quartermaster insisted it be stored next to the gunpowder because morale is just as important as munitions. Opinions varied. Music was central to it all. Sea shanties weren't just work songs, they were rallying cries, lullabies, inside jokes. Pirates altered lyrics to reflect recent events. 15 men on a dead man's chest could easily become 17 toes in Jenkins' stew, depending on the day's disasters. Historians still argue whether these performances were based on formal European plays or more improvised pirate folklore. Some crews reenacted bits of Shakespeare picked up in port cities. Others invented stories about sea gods, cursed captains, or talking fish. One ship in the Indian Ocean was said to perform a recurring soap opera involving an octopus, a widowed mermaid, and an overly romantic cannonball. Instruments, whatever they could find. Fiddles, flutes, makeshift drums made from barrels and stretched sailcloth. If you could hit it, pluck it, or bang it. Without breaking the ship, it became an instrument. And if you could sing without getting booed, you were a star. Fringe fact. Some pirates traveled with pet musicians, usually former street performers or tavern minstrels they'd kidnapped with extreme enthusiasm. These performers were often treated surprisingly well, fed, protected, even tipped in coins or stolen sugar. One violinist reportedly earned 2 full shares of loot on one voyage, just for keeping the crew from murdering each other during doldrums. And then there were the comedy acts. Pirates loved crude humor. Impersonations of hated officers, dramatic retellings of raids with wildly exaggerated injuries his head spun twice before falling off, and puppet shows using carved potatoes. One pirate known only as Captain Pickle was famous for his one-man show in which he played all 12 members of a Spanish galleon's crew, using only a sock, a crab claw, and a boiled cabbage. Critics were mixed, but the audience loved it. Some captains even encouraged performance nights as part of ship morale. Black Bart Roberts, known for his strict but effective leadership, allowed music every Sunday and supported organized storytelling among the crew. Keeps their minds off mutiny, he supposedly said, and their mouths too busy for complaints. And this wasn't limited to comedy. Pirates also told ghost stories, long rambling tales about cursed ships' drowned lovers, or spectral crews doomed to wander forever. Often performed by candlelight, these stories terrified the younger crew members and amused the older ones. One tale, The Laughing Sailor's Lantern, was so popular, it was retold across multiple ships for decades. It involved a haunted oil lamp, a possessed monkey, and a laugh that drove men mad. Delightful bedtime material. These performances helped pirates cope with loss fear and the sheer absurdity of their existence. When your job includes the risk of death by cannon disease or poorly cooked eel stew, sometimes laughter is the best medicine. Or at least a temporary distraction. And believe it or not, some pirates were known for their musical talent. One flutist nicknamed Feathers became a minor legend for playing through storms, soothing the ship with eerie melodies that cut through the wind. After he died in a freak mop accident, don't ask his flute was nailed to the mast in his honor. No one played it again, mostly because it was covered in mop water. Now picture the scene torches flicker. Shadows dance on the sails and the sea hums gently beyond the hull. A pirate dressed as a Spanish duchess recites lines from memory while the crew roars with laughter. Someone hands out dried mango slices. A small dog in a hat howls along to the fiddle. It's absurd. It's loud. It's exactly what they need. In this strange floating theater, roles are fluid. One night, you're the villain. The next, the romantic lead. And maybe tomorrow you'll be the tree. And as you curl into your hammock, the music still drifting through the timbers, you realize that even the most hardened criminals craved a stage. A moment to laugh. A chance to pretend, if only for an hour, that the world was something softer. The sun's barely up and already there's blood on the deck. Not from a fight, though. It's just Jenkins again. He tripped over a coil of rope and reopened that nasty gash on his shin. He shrugs it off and limps toward the ship's galley where a barrel labeled surgery sits ominously between a rum cask and some questionable bread. Today you're getting to know the grisly ingenious and sometimes downright baffling world of pirate medicine. A patchwork of superstition, improvisation, and the occasional burst of unexpected brilliance. And yes, you'll also meet the pirate who literally had a silver nose. Now, let's get this out of the way. Pirates weren't exactly pioneers of sterile technique. There were no gloves, no antiseptics, and certainly no anesthesia beyond bite this and scream quietly. But they had their own kind of logic, and in many cases it worked. At least, enough. Every large pirate crew had at least one person designated as a surgeon, though that title could range from former Navy doctor to guy who once pulled a splinter without crying. These makeshift medics treated wounds with whatever was at hand, rum for disinfectant gunpowder to cauterize and tobacco smoke. Blown into wounds. Yes, you heard that correctly. Blown into wounds. Historians still argue whether tobacco was truly believed to disinfect or simply distract, but either way, pirates loved it. Smoke was blown into cuts' ears and on particularly bad days, the rectum. That's right. The tobacco enema was a thing. For cramps, for drowning, for reasons. Please do not try this at home. Now about that silver nose. One pirate known in whispers as Iron Tom reportedly lost his nose in battle and had a prosthetic forged from melted coins. He wore it strapped to his face with sailcloth and scared the daylights out of new recruits. Other pirates sported wooden legs, ivory hands, or improvised limb covers made from cannon tampers or broomsticks. Fashionable number functional, surprisingly, and these pirates weren't shy about adapting. If a musket ball shattered your leg, you could expect an amputation. But the procedure wasn't always a death sentence. In fact, amputations had a fairly high survival rate if done quickly and without infection. The ship surgeon would lay out his tools, bone saw, tourniquet, leather strap for biting, and a bucket. The faster the cut, the better your chances, especially if they used a hot tar plug to stop the bleeding. Brutal, but better than sepsis. Pirate ships also carried herbs, ginger cloves, garlic, and sometimes local island plants thought to cure fever or repel spirits. One infamous concoction called Devil's Shrub was used for everything from headaches to broken ribs. It did nothing, except induce hallucinations, which, to be fair, made some pirates feel great about their broken ribs. Fringe tidbit. Some pirates believed applying powdered gold to wounds helped healing. Others swore by urine-soaked bandages, citing purity. Desperation makes for creativity, and medical journals of the time, at least the ones written by captured pirates, include all sorts of wild attempts: boiled eel skin compresses, crab shell poultices, or chanting over the wound in bad Latin. The most trusted pirate medical kit contained sail needles for stitching, twine for crude sutures, brandy for cleaning and courage, small knives, often more than one because the first gets too dull, a hook used more than you want to know, a spoon not for eating, and then there was the eye patch. Contrary to popular belief, pirates didn't wear these solely because of lost eyes. Some used them to keep one eye adjusted to the dark, making it easier to move below deck during battles. Raise the patch and you could instantly see in the shadows. Tactical, clever, very pirate. Historians still debate whether this practice was widespread or just anecdotal, but it's a rare example of a pirate accessory being more than just a fashion statement. Unlike Jenkins' necklace made entirely of fish teeth, no one knows why. He won't say. We don't ask anymore. Dental problems were common. Scurvy turned gums black and teeth to dust. One pirate captain had all his molars removed to stop the pain, and then refused to eat anything that wasn't mush. He commanded with a straw clenched between his lips and a glare that could melt glass. Rumor has it he once fired someone for crunching too loudly. But pirates knew about scurvy even if they didn't understand vitamin C. When they could, they stocked citrus fruits, limes, oranges, even fermented lemon paste. One ship traded stolen silks for a massive crate of pickled lemons and declared the day a holiday. No one got scurvy for 2 weeks. It was glorious. Still, some pirate medical practices were pure nonsense. Bleeding sick crewmates with leeches, chanting prayers backward, wrapping wounds in octopus skin. But for every quack cure, there were a dozen improvisations that actually helped, like splinting a broken arm with driftwood or using whale oil to keep wounds moist. And perhaps strangest of all, many pirates kept track of injuries and illnesses in ship logs, not for health reasons, but to settle future treasure claims. Jenkins lost a toe in the Jamaica skirmish 1/4 share bonus. Jenkins again. Always Jenkins. As the stars fade and the ship creaks with first light, you pass the surgery barrel one last time. A pirate is snoring with a bandaged stump and a smile on his face. The surgeon hums a lullaby while cleaning a bloodied blade and rum. Another day saved, another limb lost. And you realize they weren't just barbarians with cutlasses, they were resourceful survivors crafting medicine in the world's harshest classroom, doing whatever it took to keep going, even if it involved tobacco smoke and a spoon. The ship rolls lazily beneath a blue sky, the sails soft in the breeze, and for once no one is yelling or bleeding. It's a rare calm day at sea, perfect for repairs, gossip, and apparently feeding the parrot rum-soaked crackers. Yes, you've officially reached the most unexpected part of pirate tradition, pets. Not just decorative parrots perched on shoulders for dramatic effect, though there were plenty of those, but a whole floating menagerie of animal companions, each with its own strange tale. You might think pirates with their cutthroat ways and canon addictions wouldn't have time for animals, but oh, you'd be wrong. Start with the obvious parrots. Bright, loud, borderline rude parrots. Pirates love them for their color, their mimicry, and their market value. In many ports, a well-trained parrot fetched a small fortune, especially if it could say something risque in multiple languages. One captain made his parrot say surrender or bleed in Spanish, French, and Portuguese. Very practical, but the truth is parrots were more than just talking ornaments. They were companions in a brutally lonely world. Their ability to echo a crewmate's voice sometimes eerily accurately made them beloved and feared. One story tells of a parrot that mimicked the voice of a long-dead quartermaster, sending half the crew into a superstitious panic during a storm. Historians still argue whether these birds were standard among all crews or just popular with captains, but their legacy is clear. Some parrots even had tiny hammocks built into the captain's quarters. Others were fed better than the cook. And in one recorded case, a pirate left his entire fortune, a chest of silver and rare spices, to his parrot named Colonel Beakley. The bird did not spend it wisely, but parrots were just the beginning. Cats were the real MVPs of the high seas. Every ship needed a cat not for cuteness, but for survival. Rats on board meant ruined food, gnawed ropes, and disease. A good ship's cat could save a voyage. Pirates not only tolerated them, they respected them. There are reports of cats being given tiny collars made of coin, or even small leather vests stitched with the ship's insignia. One legendary feline named Captain Whiskers really was credited with saving a ship by chasing rats off a powder keg during a thunderstorm. He received a full share of loot for his heroic service and reportedly bit 2 admirals in retirement. Some crews believed cats could predict weather. If the cat hid a storm was coming, if it jumped onto the sail rigging, bad luck was near. And if it stared at a crewmate too long, well, that crewmate might be sleeping with the fishes soon. The cat, of course, never confirmed or denied. Less expected companions. Monkeys. Pirates returning from Central and South America often picked up small monkeys as pets. Mischievous, quick, and weirdly fond of sugar cubes, they became the ship's jesters. One was trained to steal trinkets from captured ships. Another rang the bell every morning, which annoyed everyone, but became tradition anyway. And then there were goats. Goats were practical. They provided milk, sometimes meat, and occasionally entertainment. One ship kept a goat named Mr. Butter, who wore a pirate hat and stood on the crow's nest during battles, bleeding ferociously. Was it strategic? No. Was it hilarious? Absolutely. Crewmates claimed he was a reincarnated sailor. He bit 2 people and was given his own hammock. Pirates, as we've established, are not overly bound by logic. Fringe tidbit. Some pirates kept lizards in cages believed to bring luck or ward off scurvy. One captain swore his iguana kept his bones strong. Another insisted his turtle could smell gold. Neither claim has held up to scientific testing, but you can't argue with tradition. Even more bizarre pirates name their pets after enemies' ex-lovers and occasionally themselves. A common insult involved calling someone by their animal's name. Don't be such a beakly meant you were acting like a pompous bird who repeated everyone's bad ideas. And when animals died, which sadly happened often, they were given proper burials, sometimes more elaborate than a sailor might get. One crew held a full ceremony at sea for a monkey who had fallen overboard. The captain cried. The parrot said something wildly inappropriate. The rum flowed. Some pirates believe their animals carried their souls, or at least their luck. Losing one could signal doom. Gaining one, especially from a plundered ship, was a sign the ocean favored you. Superstition ruled everything on a pirate ship, and pets were tangled right in the middle. A few ships even allowed pets to vote during crew decisions, sort of. A parrot's squawk could be counted as agreement. A cat walking across the ballot might cancel it. Was it nonsense entirely? But it made sense to them. And sometimes that's all that mattered. Historians still debate whether pirates loved their pets as deeply as modern sailors do, or if they simply tolerated them for luck and food protection. But when you read letters, diaries, and trial records, you see its small mentions of missing dogs, stolen parrots, and one heartfelt note from a pirate who promised to find Whiskers wherever the tide takes me. So tonight, as the moonlight glows on polished wood, and the soft purr of a cat mixes with the rustle of feathers, you realize this floating community, so often seen as brutal and wild, had a soft spot. A gentle heartbeat. In a world of hard men and harsh storms, sometimes it was a furry face or a colorful squawk that reminded them of home. There's a commotion on deck, not the usual shouting over a tangled sail or someone dropping a cannonball on their foot, but laughter high-pitched and unrestrained. You look up and nearly drop your spyglass. That's not the new cabin boy climbing the rigging. That's a woman in full pirate gear, grinning wildly, one boot planted on the railing, a cutlass balanced casually on her shoulder. Tonight, you enter the fascinating, confusing, and rarely discussed world of cross-dressing and gender-bending at sea, where identity wasn't just fluid, it was seawater splashed rum-soaked, and completely unbothered by societal expectations. You see, pirate ships were surprisingly flexible when it came to who could join the crew, as long as you could pull your weight and keep your mouth shut. And so many women joined disguised as men. Others didn't bother with the disguise. And then there were those who shifted identities as easily as sails in a changing wind. The most famous examples, Anne Bonny and Mary Red, of course. Both dressed as men. Both fought fiercely. Both shared a close bond. Possibly romantic, possibly just, I'll stab someone for you. Level friendship. Mary had joined the military dressed as a man years before piracy. And Anne, well, Anne punched a fellow pirate in the face for mocking her aim. She was not to be trifled with. Their captain, Calico Jack Rackham, knew their identities and didn't care. They fight better than most of the men, he allegedly said. And in battle, both Anne and Mary fought bare-chested to reveal their true selves, equal parts defiance and intimidation. Historians still argue whether that part is myth or truth, but it lives in legend either way. But they weren't the only ones. There are tales buried deep in ship logs and court records of men dressing as women, especially when infiltrating port cities, attending masquerades, or simply because the lines between costume and self blurred over time. One pirate named Silky Pete was famous for wearing dresses during shore leave and fighting duels in heels. He won most of them. Fringe tidbit: one Spanish Navy report mentions a pirate crew that raided a harbor dressed entirely in stolen nuns' habits, which they removed mid-fight to reveal pistols, knives, and at least one rooster. Historians are still baffled. The locals never recovered, and gender disguise wasn't always theatrical. For some, it was survival. The sea offered anonymity. A runaway bride could become a boatswain. An orphaned girl could become jackknife and earn a full share of loot. The ship didn't care what you were, only whether you were useful, and didn't snore like a walrus. Some pirate codes address the issue directly. A few forbade women on board, claiming they brought bad luck. Others were more open. One ship allowed all who can hold a blade and keep a secret. That was the rule. Nothing about gender, just ability and loyalty. And ability mattered. Pirate life wasn't easy. You hauled ropes, fired cannons, gutted fish, and scrubbed decks in 40 knot winds. If you couldn't keep up, you didn't last. But if you could swing a cutlass, patch a sail, and drink your weight in grog, you earned respect. One particularly telling account describes a captured pirate identified at trial as a woman. Her crewmates protested. "She's no woman," one said. "She's a brother." It wasn't an insult. It was a declaration identity on a pirate ship was chosen, not assigned. And then there were shipboard performers, many of whom played with gender as part of their act. The galley girls, for example, were two pirates who performed comedy skits dressed as exaggerated aristocratic ladies, complete with powdered wigs made from sheep's wool and stolen flour. Their act was so beloved that mutiny was postponed 3 times just to keep them on board. Was any of this acceptance rooted in modern ideas of gender fluidity or equality? Not exactly. Pirates weren't activists. They were opportunists. But in their chaotic little corner of the world far from the laws of land, people found space to become themselves, however strange or stitched together that self might be. Some ships even had gender-neutral sleeping quarters, though they didn't call them that. They just didn't separate people. Everyone slept where they could. One crewmate's hammock could be next to another's without concern for anything but snoring volume and body odor. And when pirates died, they were remembered for what they did, not who they were. She took down a Spanish brig with 1 cannon and a meat cleaver. He cooked for 12 days with a broken arm and no spices. These were the eulogies. The rest was irrelevant. Still, some pirates had to fight for recognition. One woman discovered by an enemy captain and mocked as a wench with a blade challenged him to single combat. She won, and then she took his boots. They were very nice boots. Even today, some records remain ambiguous. Trial documents list pirates only by nicknames: Red Ned, Spooky, Jane Whisper. Gender never mentioned. Maybe it didn't matter. Or maybe by the time it did, the sea had washed it all away. So tonight, as you lean against the rail and watch a pirate wearing a lavender sash and a stolen bishop's hat, bark orders with perfect authority, you realize something. This world, dangerous, dirty, chaotic, had one rule that truly mattered. Be loyal. Be brave. Be useful. The rest, that was just flair. You're jolted from a nap by the sharp crack of a whip. Not the cruel kind, but the ceremonial kind. A cheer rises from the deck. Someone yells, "It's Friday, lads," and you groggily remember what day it is. Welcome to Flogging Friday. Now don't get alarmed. This wasn't some strange pirate holiday created purely for pain. Well, not entirely. What you're about to witness is one of the strangest, darkest, and weirdest forms of pirate discipline and humor mashed together in a way that only pirates could invent: a weekly punishment party. Yes, pirates took their justice seriously. Break the code, You'd pay for it. Steal from the crew, you'd be lucky to just be flogged. But in the strange cultural stew of life at sea, certain captains developed a tradition setting aside 1 day a week for punishment, no matter how small the infraction. Missed a shift flogged. Overcooked the stew flogged. Told the same joke 4 times in one night. Extra flogged. But because these events happened so regularly, they became almost theatrical, a blend of public shame, entertainment, and weirdly structured HR protocol. And Friday? That was prime time. The crew was restless after a long week. Discipline had to be reinforced, so the quartermaster would gather the guilty and the not-so-guilty and call the crowd to order. What followed was a combination of courtroom drama, gallows humor, and slapstick punishment. Now let's be clear, flogging was painful. Pirates used cat-o'-nine-tails whips with multiple knotted strands designed to shred skin. It could scar, it could maim, but unlike the Navy, where lashings could be life-threatening, pirate crews often set limits, 5 lashes, 10 at most, just enough to embarrass and cleanse the spirit. One captain even referred to flogging as resetting morale. Historians still argue whether these routines were based on old naval customs or invented by pirates to maintain order without total chaos. Some suggest it began as a method to centralize discipline to prevent spontaneous brawls from escalating into mutiny. Others believe it was simply efficient, punish everyone on the same day, then get back to business. Either way, the ritual had structure. The accused stood on a crate. The charge was read aloud often with commentary. Jenkins found guilty of hiding the last orange. Sentenced 3 lashes and public citrus shame. Then the lash was administered, followed by a sarcastic round of applause. Someone might play a fiddle. Another might throw a flower. It was performance as much as punishment. Fringe tidbit: on some ships, the guilty could nominate a champion to take their flogging for them. Usually a friend, occasionally a pet. One goat allegedly took a flogging in place of its owner and was later awarded a medal made from spoon metal. He wore it proudly until he ate it. Some pirates laughed during their floggings to show bravery. Others wore extra shirts for padding, hoping the quartermaster didn't notice. One man tried stuffing fish down his back for cushioning. It did not work. The flogging happened anyway, and he spent the next 3 days being chased by cats. And then there were the creative punishments. If flogging seemed too harsh, some crews opted for alternatives. Standing in a barrel with a dunce hat, singing a humiliating sea shanty solo. One pirate was forced to dance a jig in silence for 20 minutes, while the crew judged his footwork. He scored an 8. The wig didn't help. Flogging Fridays often ended in forgiveness ceremonies, strange as it sounds. The quartermaster would shake the hand or stub of each punished man, and the crew would offer a cheer. No grudges at sea, one ship's code read. Only scars and stronger backs. The psychological effect surprisingly positive. Pirates knew when punishment was coming. They didn't fear random violence. They braced for impact, made peace with the crew, and moved on. It was a system flawed, painful, but oddly consistent. One captain even let the crew vote to cancel a flogging if they thought the offense was minor. This happened precisely once. The accused was a dog named Salty Pete who had eaten someone's boots. The crew forgave him. The boots were not so lucky. Now, not all ships followed the tradition. Some captains believed in private punishment, others in none at all. But those who held to Flogging Friday treated it like sacred theater. You could be humiliated, but you couldn't be ignored. Everyone took part. Everyone remembered. And some even looked forward to it. Not the pain, but the camaraderie. The absurdity. The relief of knowing the week's tensions would be released, whipped out into the wind with a few lashes and a half-hearted cheer. As the ceremony ends and the quartermaster closes his book, The punished return to their duties sore perhaps, but grinning. Someone slaps Jenkins on the back. Someone else hands out mango slices. The parrot squawks. More flogging, please, and is promptly ignored. And you realize that in this wild world where loyalty was everything and chaos always loomed, even punishment could be turned into ritual release and laughter. Because if you have to get flogged, you might as well do it with an audience and a good sea breeze. The wind has shifted. The horizon burns with golden light as the ship slices through gentle waves. But below deck the mood isn't so poetic. Someone found bones in the stew again, and not the usual kind. See how whispers begin to swirl. The crew grows quiet. One word slips between gritted teeth passed from bunk to bunk, spoon to spoon. Cannibals. Tonight you're entering the murky waters of one of piracy's most unsettling and misunderstood legends. Pirate cannibalism. Fact. Myth propaganda. The answer, like most pirate tales, is a bit of everything, served with a side of theatrical dread. First, let's be very clear. Most pirates were not cannibals. Despite popular portrayals, especially in penny dreadfuls and pulp novels of the 18th and 19th centuries, the image of pirates dining on human flesh was mostly fear-mongering, used to terrify would-be merchant sailors and justify brutal crackdowns by the authorities. But there were stories, some real, some embellished, and some whispered by pirates themselves, not because they liked eating people, but because the fear of it was a weapon. Imagine this: your ship is under siege. The black flag rises. You hear tales of this crew flaying captives alive, feasting on their hearts using bones as dice. Do you fight to the death, or throw your sword overboard and beg for mercy? Cannibalism was in many cases a reputation strategy, a monstrous branding tool. If you were terrifying enough, you didn't need to fire a shot. The threat of what might happen was sometimes more useful than what actually did. Historians still argue whether actual cases happened out of cruelty or pure desperation. And in extreme conditions, lost at sea, shipwrecked marooned pirates like any sailors faced starvation. In such rare, horrific moments, cannibalism did occur, but not out of malice, out of survival. One of the most infamous examples is the tale of the shipwrecked crew of the Batavia, a Dutch vessel whose survivors turned on each other in brutal ways, including confirmed cannibalism. While not strictly pirates, the story fed into the wider narrative that life at sea was always one bad storm away from madness. Among pirates, rumors swirled around certain captains. Edward Lowe, for instance, was accused by enemy reports of eating a captured Portuguese officer's heart. Was it true? Probably not. But the legend stuck. The fear followed him like a shadow. Fringe tidbit. Some pirate crews reportedly used fake cannibalism rituals as psychological warfare. One ship, after taking prisoners, would stage a mock ceremony involving fake blood bones from livestock and exaggerated chewing sounds. The prisoners, terrified, would confess everything and beg to be traded or ransomed. As tactics go, it was disturbing, but effective. And then there's the curious case of the meat barrel. Some captains kept salted meat in barrels labeled with skulls, not because it was human, but because the idea of human meat kept nosy crewmates from sneaking extra rations. One former pirate testified that for 3 years he thought he'd eaten long pig human meat, only to discover it was smoked goat. His nightmares, however, were real. Some pirates leaned into the myth intentionally. During raids, they'd yell phrases like, "We dine on hearts tonight," or "bones for breakfast." It wasn't literal, it was theater, like a heavy metal concert in 1725, complete with swords and worse hygiene. One documented instance involved a pirate named Mad Jack Marsden, who, when asked by a terrified prisoner if he would be eaten, allegedly leaned in and whispered, "Only if you're tender." He then laughed, released the man, and stole his boots. Jack was later executed, but the boots were never recovered. The British Navy, for its part, capitalized on these stories. Pamphlets warned of heathen pirates who roast their victims on open flames. One political cartoon from the early 1700s shows a pirate cooking a nobleman on a spit while drinking tea. Subtle. But were there truly ritualistic cannibal cults among pirates? Probably not. Most pirate crews had strong codes of conduct, many rooted in Christian or syncretic moral frameworks. Some even banned profanity, let alone eating fellow humans. And remember, pirates needed reputation, yes, but they also needed crew. Turning your men into lunch isn't great for recruitment. Still, superstition lingered. Certain ships wouldn't allow knives to be left upright in the deck for fear it invited hunger spirits. Some crews threw bones overboard in elaborate appeasement rituals after meals, chanting strange verses to prevent curses or misfortune. The line between myth and management was blurry. And perhaps most curiously, some pirate ghost ships in legend were said to be crewed by the eternally hungry sailors who had resorted to cannibalism, and were cursed to roam forever, eating only shadows and regret. One of these tales, the Hunger Gale, still circulates in Caribbean folklore. Supposedly, if you hear chewing in the wind, you're too close to the doomed vessel. So tonight, as you sip your lukewarm broth and avoid eye contact with the stew pot, remember most pirates were scavengers, not savages. Survivors, not monsters. But they understood the power of a good horror story. They knew that sometimes the suggestion of horror could win a battle before it began. And as the sea darkens and laughter rises once more on deck, you hear someone yell, "Don't burn the stew or we'll be eating Jenkins next." Laughter follows. Even Jenkins laughs. Mostly. The sun is high and the sea is glassy. One of those unnerving still days where the sails hang limp and even the parrots go quiet. The heat bakes the deck, the crew snoozes in whatever shade they can find, and somewhere below the carpenter hammers gently at a wooden box. You wander closer and realize it's a coffin. But not just any coffin. It's more like a sea chest, with a few strange details, a brass spyglass tucked inside a faded flag folded carefully, and something that looks suspiciously like a half-empty bottle of rum. You've stumbled into one of the oddest pirate traditions of all burials at sea, and the sometimes elaborate, sometimes hilarious, occasionally very unsettling rituals that came with them. Death aboard a pirate ship was not exactly rare. Between disease injury accidents, cannonballs, and the occasional duel over who gets the last biscuit, crews had to handle burials with frequency and style. Unlike the Navy, which had formal procedures, pirates turned funerals into something much more personal. No standard service. No chaplain reading solemn verses. Pirate funerals could be raucous, poetic, or downright strange. The most common method: wrapping the body in a hammock weighted with cannonballs or rocks and sewing it shut with sail thread. The final stitch tradition insisted went through the nose just to make sure the deceased wasn't faking it. One pirate allegedly sneezed at that point. He recovered. The needle wielder did not. Historians still argue whether these elaborate send-offs were superstition, sentimentality, or just pirates being pirates. But the rituals mattered. A proper burial was seen as essential not just for the dead, but to avoid cursing the ship. A body left unburied could invite bad luck, sickness, or ghostly visitations. Some pirates added personal items to the wrap: a favorite dagger, a coin for the ferryman, a lock of hair from a lover back in Tortuga. One crew always placed a spoon in the corpse's hand for the stew pot in the afterlife. Was it symbolic? Was it a joke knowing pirates? Probably both. Fringe tidbit: one ship developed a tradition of singing sea shanties in reverse during the burial. No one knew why. It sounded awful. But they insisted it kept spirits from getting stuck in the rigging. And then there were theatrical burials. Some pirates, especially captains, were honored with what can only be described as floating funerals. Their bodies placed in small boats or makeshift rafts surrounded by treasure flowers, rum, and sometimes lit torches. These pyres were then pushed out to sea and set aflame. It didn't always work. One drifted back and had to be reburned with much embarrassment. The parrot was furious. One particularly dramatic pirate, Captain Raphael the Red, demanded his body be posed with a sword in one hand and a flag in the other, lashed to a barrel and launched during a thunderstorm. His crew obliged. They never saw the barrel again, or the sword. But legend has it he now haunts every tavern with uneven tables. Sometimes, pirates faked burials. If a crewmate was sick but not quite dead, they'd stage a funeral to hide them from authorities or throw off rival ships. One man lay in a coffin for 3 days while the ship dodged a British patrol. He later said it was the best sleep he'd ever had aside from the rats. And on a few rare ships, pirates believed in grave rotation. A small memorial box or plank marked each fallen comrade, and every time a new one died, the oldest name was sent below, spiritually to make room. It was equal parts creepy and organized. Now let's talk about the sea chest trick. Sometimes when a pirate knew the end was near, he'd fill his sea chest with personal items. Maps, rings, coins, even fake treasure hints, and have it sealed and hidden in a secret spot aboard. After his death, the chest would be ceremoniously opened. Sometimes it held actual wealth. Sometimes it held a note that said, "Tell Jenkins he still owes me 5 pieces of 8. In one infamous case, the chest held a puzzle box with a riddle etched into the side. Solving it led the crew to buried loot on a remote island. Or so the story goes. What's more likely is that the crew drank the puzzle box and buried the map. Ghost stories abounded around burial spots. Some pirates feared certain parts of the ocean were cursed graveyards, especially those where ships had been lost with all hands. Crews avoided those waters or tossed offerings overboard as they passed a coin, a biscuit, or a whisper of apology. And if a crew couldn't bury someone at sea, say if they were in battle or running for their lives, they'd hold a pocket wake. Everyone would take a sip of rum, say something about the fallen, and promise to bury them properly later. Whether they did or not depended on how the wind was blowing. Even pets received burials. Cats were often wrapped in cloth and buried at sea with small coins. Parrots sometimes received tiny boats of their own. One crew gave a monkey a full cannon salute, though the monkey had admittedly bitten everyone except the captain. Modern records show pirates had a strange, tender respect for death. Brutal in life, but oddly reverent in passing. One captain wrote, "A man dies but once, and if it's on the sea, he should have salt for company and stars for a shroud." And as the ship slows to a gentle drift, the crew gathers at the rail. The hammock is ready. The weight is tied. The quartermaster clears his throat, says a few words, something about bravery and mangoes and never letting Jenkins cook again. The body slips silently into the deep. The sea swallows it without complaint. And you realize that even pirates, those scoundrels of the storm, needed ritual. They needed closure. And sometimes all they had was a hammock, a cannonball, and a song sung backward into the wind. The sails billow gently, the breeze sweet with salt, and all seems calm until someone slams a mug onto the table and growls, "I say he's done." That's all it takes. The air thickens. Chairs scrape. The crew looks up. The captain, mid-bite of dried fruit, raises one eyebrow. You've just walked into a pirate election. And not the kind with paper ballots and campaign pins. This one ends with someone possibly being voted off the ship. Or, depending on the mood, the island. Tonight you get a front row seat to the mutinous marvel of pirate leadership transitions. Or as one crew called it, the salty vote of no confidence. It's one of the strangest truths about pirates. They ran their ships like floating democracies. Not always fair, not always peaceful, but startlingly structured. And while we covered elections to captaincy tonight, we focus on the even weirder part, removing a captain. Sometimes calmly, sometimes with a plank. See, on many ships, the captain wasn't a king. He was more like a CEO whose board of directors all carried weapons and had very strong opinions about breakfast rations. If the crew thought the captain had lost his nerve, gotten greedy, steered them into too many storms, or insulted the wrong parrot, they could vote to replace him. And that vote, it didn't require a hall of parchment or a town hall, just a gathering on deck, a loud argument, and a majority of voices or pebbles in a bucket or dagger tosses at a target. One ship used knots in a rope. Another used different colored beans. Imagine losing your job over a handful of beans. Historians still argue whether this was formalized by code or simply tradition, but in many crews the process was respected. You might be stripped of command, sure, but you'd keep your share and your dignity unless you'd really messed up. In that case, you might be voted off the island. This wasn't always a joke. In several recorded cases, crews dropped their deposed captains off on small, uninhabited landmasses, usually with some food water and a sarcastic note. Hope you like coconuts. Love the former crew. One such unlucky fellow, Captain Dodd, was abandoned on a reef with a bag of biscuits and a telescope. He survived by fishing and writing angry poetry on palm bark until a French trader rescued him. He later published a book titled Vote Me Not, which was largely ignored. Some crews gave their captains a chance to defend themselves like a courtroom drama with added grog. A crewmate might read a list of grievances. 3 failed raids, 2 suspicious stew nights, and the unfortunate incident with the admiral's niece. The captain could rebut. If he won, he stayed. If not, he packed. Stayed. If Fringe Tidbit, one pirate ship held secret ballots by having each man carve a mark into a plank. The carpenter then counted the marks. When someone pointed out the carpenter had been bribed with extra lemon rinds, they switched to using fish bones. Democracy is a messy business, but it wasn't always about failure. Sometimes the vote came from philosophical differences. One captain refused to attack a ship flying a neutral flag. The crew voted him out for being too ethical. Another captain only wanted to raid sugar ships for the sake of teeth and trade, he said. His crew preferred gold. He lost the vote and opened a bakery in Barbados. Even famous captains weren't immune. Blackbeard was nearly voted out once for hoarding too much rum. He avoided it by throwing a massive party and forgiving several debts, political maneuvering pirate style, and replacing the captain. That was easy. The quartermaster often stepped up, especially if he had orchestrated the vote. Other times, a charismatic gunner or seasoned raider took the reins. On one ship, the parrot was briefly named interim captain, but its policies were inconsistent and it pooped on the map. Still, the system worked. Crews were more likely to stay loyal if they believed their voices mattered. Mutinies were rare on well-run ships, and when they happened, they weren't usually violent. Just loud and full of deeply sarcastic commentary. Sometimes a captain saw the vote coming and stepped down voluntarily. "Gentlemen," he'd say, "I see the tide's turned." Then he'd hand over the compass and quietly move into a support role: cook, carpenter, goat wrangler. One former captain became the ship's official night storyteller. His ghost stories were apparently terrible, but no one dared vote him off again. Of course, not all transitions were smooth. Some captains fought back. One tried locking himself in the hold with all the rum. The crew smoked him out using chili powder and lantern soot. Another tried to bribe the crew with a chest of stolen wigs. It worked briefly until someone realized the wigs were fake. But for every violent mutiny, there were a dozen quiet, odd, strangely organized leadership swaps. They didn't always make sense, but they were pirate sense. Built on loyalty fairness-ish and an intense fear of being left on a crab-infested island, as the sun dips lower and the crew cheers the arrival of a new captain, whether by vote, duel, or parrot whisper, you realize that this wasn't chaos. It was governance. Messy, noisy, occasionally drunk governance. But governance all the same. Because in the end, every pirate knew power granted by force could be taken by force. But power given by the crew that meant something, even if it came down to fish bones in a bucket. The raid is over, the sails patch the blood mostly scrubbed from the deck. The spoils crates of sugar bolts of silk, a crate of suspiciously well-fed chickens have been divided. The crew hums with that strange post-loot energy, a little richer, a little bruised. Someone asked the question no pirate ever wants to hear. So, what now? You've just entered the rarest, most uncertain phase of pirate life retirement. Or at least something that vaguely resembled it. Tonight you'll explore the often overlooked, often bizarre reality of what happened when pirates decided to hang up their cutlasses. Spoiler, it wasn't all hammocks and mojitos. Contrary to the popular idea that all pirates died young in a blaze of cannon smoke, and bad decisions, many actually lived long enough to consider life after piracy. And their options were wide-ranging. Some turned tavern keeper. Others became merchants. A few tried farming. One attempted opera. Let's start with the most common route, the tavern. Pirates loved taverns while sailing. And when they retired, many opened their own, often in places like Nassau Port Royal or the lawless edges of Madagascar. These weren't cozy pubs with flower boxes. These were loud, smoky, barely standing booze halls full of gossip cards and questionable stew. Retired pirates made great tavern owners because they knew exactly what current pirates wanted. Cheap drinks, soft hammocks, strong locks on treasure chests, and most importantly, someone who wouldn't ask questions. One such man, one-legged Saul, kept a parrot trained to bite anyone who asked about his past. The parrot was eventually banned from 3 islands. Others tried going legit, and by legit we mean legit adjacent. Some bought ships and became privateers, legal pirates working for a nation. Same job, but now with paperwork. Others traded goods, opened shipyards, or offered security consulting. One former pirate went by the title Maritime Problem Solver and mysteriously got very rich after a governor's cousin disappeared. Fringe tidbit, a few pirates even rebranded themselves as nobility. With enough gold and a good tailor, you could move to a port city, buy a title, and pretend to be a retired planter or merchant. One such man lived for 10 years as Baron of the Mangoes until someone recognized his tattoo of a cannon-firing flaming fish. Historians still argue whether these transformations were usually successful or just temporary masks. Many pirates tried to go straight only to be dragged back into the sea by debt boredom or a particularly annoying magistrate. Some pirates returned home if they had a home, but many found that life on land no longer fit. The sea had made them restless, suspicious, wild. They missed the sway of the ship, the chaos of raids, the simplicity of waking up knowing exactly who wanted to kill you. One notable pirate, after 20 years at sea, tried becoming a poet. His collection Tides and Teeth included haunting verses about betrayal, rum, and longing. It sold 7 copies. 4 were bought by his mother. 2 were used to start a cooking fire. Others turned to storytelling. Old pirates became walking legends, spinning tales for coin in taverns and marketplaces. Some embellished their exploits. Some invented entire ship's crews and treasure maps. One man charged a silver piece just to touch the map, tattooed on his back, which turned out to be a very inaccurate drawing of a fish. But not all retirements were peaceful. Many pirates died shortly after retiring, killed by rivals arrested for old crimes, or just consumed by the boredom of safety. One ex-captain was found trying to storm his own chicken coop, claiming it was practice. He was buried with full pirate honors and one very alarmed rooster. Some formed pirate enclaves, semi-secret communities of former raiders. These were small seaside villages where you could find sword fights at dawn and rum at breakfast. One such place near Madagascar included former pirates, runaway sailors, a dentist named Clive, and a goat that acted as mayor. It lasted 7 years before it was raided by other pirates. There were even those who never left the ship. They became semi-retired figures, onboard advisors, storytellers, or glorified cargo managers. They didn't fight anymore, but they knew every knot, every reef, every hiding spot. The younger pirates called them sea uncles, and then there's the dreamers. Pirates who stashed their gold on hidden islands drew elaborate maps and swore to return when the time was right. Some did. Others never made it back. But the maps survived, some real, some fake. Some designed purely to confuse whoever found them. One led to a crate full of wigs and a note that read, "You've been pranked by Captain Giggles." There's something haunting in these tales of retirement. Pirates who fought kings and robbed empires now planting tomatoes or trying to sell seashell jewelry at the market. Some adjusted, some didn't, but nearly all carried the sea inside them, even if their feet never touched a deck again. So tonight, as the stars blink into view and the waves slap gently against the hull, you imagine an old pirate sitting on a porch, whittling a shark from driftwood. He hums a tune no one else knows. He watches the tide. And sometimes, just sometimes, he feels the wind shift and wonders. Maybe one more voyage. The sky darkens just enough to cast shadows across the deck, where the new lookout fumbles with a rope and curses in 5 languages. He's fresh, nervous, and about to make a major mistake. He's flying the wrong flag. Within seconds, the quartermaster is sprinting toward the mast. The crew howls. One grizzled pirate mutters, "That's how we got shot at off Hispaniola." Another just groans and covers his eyes. Because tonight you'll be learning about the pirate tradition you never knew was so deadly precise, flag etiquette, and the power of pirate branding. Sure, we all know about the Jolly Roger, but pirates didn't just raise random skulls and hope for the best. Flags were a form of communication, intimidation, and strategy. Flying the wrong flag at the wrong time didn't just get you mocked, it could get you sunk. Let's start with the basics. Most pirates carried multiple flags, and not just to look fancy. There was the false flag used to trick merchant ships into thinking they were friendly, the battle flag hoisted when it was time to attack, and sometimes even a retreat flag raised to signal allies or bribe targets into surrender. But here's the twist: many pirate flags were custom. No 2 crews had exactly the same design. Some showed hourglasses, times running out, bleeding hearts were serious, or entire skeletal dramas like the one where death toasts the devil with a goblet of blood. Honestly, Etsy would have loved these guys. Historians still argue whether pirates used these variations purely for fear, or whether some tried to brand themselves, establishing an identity recognizable across the Caribbean. Much like modern logos, a unique flag said, We're not just pirates, we're those pirates. And if a crew became known for brutality, their flag became a psychological missile. Merchant captains sometimes surrendered immediately upon recognizing a certain banner. Less fighting, less bloodshed. In the world of piracy, branding could save you bullets. Fringe tidbit. Some pirates were superstitious about flag colors. Black meant potential mercy. Red, no quarter, meant run. White was sometimes used to bluff surrender. One crew swore by a dark green flag with the squid eating a crown. No one knew what it meant, that was the point. And the rules went deep. Flags couldn't touch the ground, it was bad luck. Raising a flag upside down could signal distress or intentional mockery. Lowering your flag during a chase, that was surrender. Unless it was a trick which pirates loved. One ship lowered their colors, then raised a second, even scarier flag. The merchant crew wet themselves. This is historical fact. Well, it's in someone's diary, close enough. But flag etiquette also extended to alliances. If you were sailing alongside another pirate ship, matching flags was a courtesy. One crew forgot to swap back after borrowing a rival's flag and was mistaken for traitors. They had to settle the issue with a dancing contest and a duel. The dancing won. The dancing. Then there's the branding aspect. A good pirate knew that image was everything. The flag told people who you were before you said a word. It let your victims know what to expect. And if you were smart, it created a myth around your name. Take Bartholomew Roberts, who designed not one but two iconic flags. One where he clinks glasses with a skeleton, and another where he stands on two skulls labeled ABH, a Barbadian's head, and AMH, a Martinican's head. Subtle, no. Effective, absolutely. Some pirates even created secondary symbols painted on sails carved into the hull or stitched into clothing. One crew had a tiny bat embroidered on every sleeve. Another used black feathers in their hats to indicate seniority. One captain even had branded boots for his crew, left foot with the star, right with the crescent moon. No one knows why, but everyone remembered. And mistakes. They had consequences. Raise the wrong flag near a Navy patrol and they'll chase you across 3 harbors. Hoist a Jolly Roger too soon and you lose the element of surprise. Worst of all, accidentally mimic another pirate crew. That's like crashing a biker rally in the wrong colors. One such incident involved 2 ships bearing nearly identical black flags, a skull over crossed cutlasses. They met near Jamaica and immediately accused each other of plagiarism. A tense standoff followed, resolved only after a drinking contest and a promise to add a top hat to one of the skulls. And let's not forget the flag makers. Pirates didn't buy flags, they made them, usually from stolen sails dyed with soot blood, crushed berries, or ink. One notorious flag was dyed entirely with squid ink and smelled so bad it cleared enemy decks before a shot was fired. True story. Probably. Flags weren't just tools. They were talismans. Some crews refused to wash theirs. Others folded them ritually at night. And if a flag was damaged in battle, they'd hold a small ceremony to retire it, burying it at sea or cutting it into patches for lucky charms. One ship, after losing their beloved flag in a storm, stitched a new one from black petticoats donated by 3 volunteers. It became known as the Petticoat Terror and was surprisingly effective. So tonight, as the crew scrambles to correct the lookout's error and raise the right banner, the one with the hourglass and the screaming eel, you see it for what it is. A symbol, a warning, a promise. This flag tells the world we are not Navy. We are not merchants. We are not pretending. We are pirates, and we have a brand. It's just after sunset and someone's already singing off key. A barrel's been cracked open. The deck smells like spilled rum and victory. You've made it to the heart of pirate ritual, the center of their daily devotion, the liquid that kept the crew together and occasionally tore it apart. Tonight we talk about booze brawls and the sacred rum ration. Now, forget the idea that pirates were constantly drunk. Sure, many were frequently drunk, sometimes impressively so, but pirate crews had rules about alcohol, how it was stored when it was shared, and perhaps most importantly, what happened when things got out of hand. Let's start with the most beloved beverage of all, rum. Cheap, potent, and readily available in the Caribbean, rum was the undisputed king of shipboard spirits. Usually watered down to make it last longer, and to keep men from going blind, it was stored in barrels deep in the hold locked by the quartermaster. Access was controlled, not casual. Most ships instituted a daily rum ration, a fixed measure per man, often watered down into what was called grog, rum, plus water, plus sometimes citrus juice, plus usually regret. Grog helped prevent dehydration, mask the taste of questionable water, and generally kept morale high. But it wasn't all happy hours and sea shanties. Pirate codes often included clauses about drunken behavior. Get violent. You might be fined or flogged. Pass out on duty. You'd lose your next ration or have to clean the bilge. Start a fire because you wanted to cook the rum. You'd be lucky to survive. Historians still argue whether pirates drank more responsibly than their Navy counterparts. On paper, they had fewer restrictions, but in practice, discipline mattered. A crew couldn't afford to be too drunk to steer. One pirate code read, "Drink what ye will, but be ready to kill at dawn." Inspirational. And the fights, oh, the brawls. Nothing passed the time between ports like a friendly or not-so-friendly brawl. Fistfights were practically a team sport. Arguments over rum shares, bad jokes, spilled stew, or who actually saw the merchant ship first often ended in wrestling matches or slap fights with fish. Fringe tidbit: one pirate crew used a brawl ring, a roped-off area near the bow, where disputes were settled with fists or occasionally spoons. The winner got bragging rights. The loser got a rum-soaked bandage. Some ships even had a brawl roster. Saturday nights got intense. And yes, there were rules. No weapons, no eye gouging, no hitting the parrot. Repeat offenders were forced to wear a shirt with "sorry" stitched across the back or stand at the bow shouting compliments at passing fish. But despite the rowdiness, drinking was often communal and controlled. Rum was poured with ritual. The oldest crew members got theirs first. Special occasions, successful raids, birthdays, surviving storms, were marked with extra rations or rum toasts. One crew gave a toast every Sunday at sunset, lifting their cups to the drowned, the damned, and the dreamers. Another read a short poem before each drink. Badly, but still tradition. Even captains weren't exempt. Some led the drinking, others avoided it entirely. Bartholomew Roberts, famously strict, forbade gambling and limited drinking to evenings only. His ship still managed to function. Others, like Blackbeard, took rum like it was religion, sometimes mixed with gunpowder, because who needs internal organs? One of the strangest traditions, the last mug ceremony. When a crewmate died, especially one beloved or particularly funny, the crew would pour a full mug of rum, leave it at their favorite spot on deck, and drink it the next night in silence. Sometimes the parrot joined in, sometimes the goat. Emotion ran deep, and it wasn't just rum. Pirates drank ale, brandy, wine, and occasionally whatever strange liquor they found in plundered cargo. One infamous disaster involved green mint cordial that turned out to be cleaning vinegar. 3 men lost their eyebrows. Permanently. Storage mattered. Booze was kept in marked barrels, sometimes with rune symbols or nicknames etched on the wood. One ship had a barrel named Sir Tips-a-Lot. Another hid their best brandy behind a false wall in the captain's quarters, only accessed with a spoon and a prayer. And when pirates ran out, things got tense. Some crews brewed their own fermenting fruit in hammocks or stuffing barrels with seawater and tropical leaves in what can only be described as the worst cocktail ever invented. Desperation has a flavor. It's not good. So why all the ritual? Why the rules? Because alcohol for pirates wasn't just about getting tipsy. It was currency, comfort, ceremony, and control. It smoothed the edges of long voyages, eased the grief of lost friends and bonded crews tighter than any chain. It was how pirates celebrated, mourned, and survived. And as the sky deepens and the latest rum toast echoes across the waves, to storms behind us and gold ahead, you sip something sweet and smoky from a dented tin cup. And you understand this isn't just drinking. It's memory. It's ritual. It's how pirates held their world together, one cup at a time. You awake to the rhythmic creak of the rigging, the soft slap of waves, and the sound of someone carefully unrolling parchment nearby. No, it's not a treasure map. It's the code. Not the kind that unlocks a chest. The kind that unlocks order in a life where nothing else makes sense. Tonight you meet the pirate code of conduct and discover that behind all the chaos, cutlasses, and cannonballs, pirates actually followed rules. Often stricter than most royal navies, you've probably heard the phrase, the pirate code. You might picture something vague growled in a smoky tavern followed by a bar brawl. But in truth, many pirate crews kept written documents, often detailed, often voted on, and often enforced with surprising consistency. These weren't just suggestions. They were more like constitutions governing everything from how loot was divided to when lanterns should be dimmed at night. One of the most famous codes comes from Captain Bartholomew Roberts, known for both his ruthlessness and his intense love of structure. His articles included rules like no lights after 8, no gambling below deck, no bringing women or boys aboard penalty death, all fights to be settled on shore, not in the ship, equal vote in affairs of moment. Yes, equal vote. That meant everyone cook to captain had a say in major decisions. It was early democracy with a touch of blood and sea salt. Historians still argue whether all pirates lived by such codes or if they were more common among larger, better organized crews. But enough examples survive to prove pirates weren't just floating mobs. They were structured societies with their own values, customs, and yes, bedtime rules. Let's talk about that. Some codes actually mandated quiet hours. Not for decorum, but so the crew could rest without murder. No shouting, stomping, or singing shanties after the third bell, one code read. Except on victory days or birthdays. Violators were often fined or forced to clean the parrot cages. Another rule, respect personal property. On a pirate ship, privacy was shockingly sacred. You could steal from a merchant ship, a governor's house, or a royal treasury, but not from your crewmate's bag. That was a serious breach. One pirate was marooned for taking someone's boots without asking. Fringe tidbits, some codes even included fashion clauses. One ship required all pirates to wear red sashes during boarding actions. Another banned excessive feathering on hats after one incident where a man's plume caught fire mid-raid. Disputes were common, but they had systems. The quartermaster, usually second in command, acted as both judge and jury. He'd listen to arguments, weigh evidence like who really owned the last biscuit, and issue a ruling. Sentences might include flogging, loss of shares, or parrot duty, which sounds fun until you've cleaned up after Jenkins' parrot for 3 days. And let's not forget injury compensation, which we covered earlier. The code often laid out specific rewards for losing limbs, eyes, fingers, even teeth. A pirate might receive 800 pieces of 8 for a leg, 400 for an arm, 100 for a finger. It wasn't generous, but it showed one thing clearly. Pirates looked out for their own. This mutual responsibility extended to funerals, rescues, and even retirement funds. Some ships set aside a small communal chest for aging pirates, wounded crewmates, or the families of the dead. Not all used it wisely. One was emptied in a single night during a mango brandy binge, but the intention was there, and codes could be updated. When a new captain took over, articles were reread, revised, or added to. One crew voted to include a new clause banning all sea spiders, real or imagined. No one remembers why. Probably Jenkins again. Codes weren't written by lawyers. They were scratched onto parchment, carved into bulkheads, or memorized and recited aloud, but they held power. The articles were read to new recruits. Violations were punished, and anyone who refused to sign was shown the door, sometimes gently, sometimes from the crow's nest. One of the strangest parts, some pirate codes were strangely progressive. They offered injury benefits, shared profits, voting rights, even racial and religious tolerance in certain cases. Pirate crews were often multi-ethnic, multilingual, and multi-faith. As long as you could fight row and hold your rum, you were in. Some ships had specific prayers or rituals built into the code. Give thanks to the sea each morning, one read. Another insisted on a toast to the wind before every raid. A few captains required the crew to touch the mast for luck before disembarking, and the penalties harsh but consistent. Repeat offenders were fined. Serious crimes, betrayal, cowardice, theft were punished with marooning, flogging, or execution. But justice, twisted as it may seem, was often public and collective. Everyone saw the sentence. Everyone felt the weight of the rule. So tonight, as the last of the lanterns flickers and the code is returned to its scroll case tied with a rope sealed with a tooth, you feel it. This wasn't just law. It was identity. A shared promise in a world that offered no safety net, no pension plan, no mercy. The pirate code said, "We are in this together, even if the next port brings betrayal, even if the next wave is our last." The sea feels different tonight. The waves hum low, the wind whispers strange things through the sails, and no one, not even Jenkins, is joking. Because tonight is no ordinary night. Tonight, someone brought a banana on board. And you're about to learn why the entire crew is now convinced you're all going to die. Welcome to the wonderfully unhinged world of pirate superstitions. Omens and sea magic where nail clippings were sacred. Bananas were cursed and sneezing at the wrong time could ruin a raid. You see, pirates weren't just fighters and thieves. They were creatures of pattern, desperately trying to find meaning in a world where storms appeared out of nowhere, ships vanished without a trace, and diseases showed up with no warning and left you talking to your own foot. So they turned to superstition. Let's start with the banana. For reasons no one fully understands, bananas were considered the worst omen possible aboard ship. Historians still argue whether this originated with real accidents, some banana-laden ships sank mysteriously, or whether it had more to do with spiders hiding in the fruit. Either way, bring a banana on board, and you'd get side eyes from everyone, including the cat. One captain reportedly threw an entire barrel overboard after discovering banana essence in a bottle of shampoo. You do not mess with banana karma. And that's just the beginning. Pirates were deeply suspicious of whistling. Whistling on deck was thought to whistle up the wind, which sounds handy, until the wind becomes a hurricane. One ship banned it completely. Another allowed it only during dance night, and even then only if accompanied by a tambourine. Sneezing had its own lore. A single sneeze meant luck. 2 sneezes meant betrayal. 3. You were cursed. The cook once sneezed 3 times before sunrise and was tied to the mast for the entire day. He was fine, but the stew never recovered. Nail clippings were dangerous. Never throw them overboard, never burn them. One crew kept theirs in a jar so the sea wouldn't steal their strength. Another buried them under the mast during a full moon. Jenkins tried selling his to a witch in Barbados. It didn't end well. Pirates feared red skies at morning dead birds on deck, empty barrels that rolled on their own, and rats leaving the ship. That last one, definitely not superstition. If the rats are leaving, you should too. Tattoos, as we've covered, often doubled as magical charms. Crosses, stars, and animals inked on the skin weren't just for identity, they were meant to protect. One pirate had a full compass tattooed on his back, claiming it spoke to the wind. He was never seen again, but not necessarily because of the tattoo. And then there were names. Certain names were avoided. Jonah Lucian and anything with worm in it were considered bad luck. One ship had 3 Lucians and lost a mast during a rainstorm. The solution renamed 2 of them Fred. Freds were lucky. Fringe tidbit, some pirates carried pocket charms like teeth wrapped in cloth coins with holes drilled through, or small bones tied to string. One man carried the same lump of ambergris for 10 years, claiming it could predict weather by smell alone. He was wrong about the weather, but very committed. Pirates were also deeply sensitive to omens before a raid. Stub your toe, cancel the attack. A spoon falls from the table, delay the ambush. One crew turned back entirely because a seagull pooped on the captain's hat. He claimed it was divine intervention. The crew claimed it was disgusting. Rituals were just as important as warnings. Before launching a raid, some pirates held quick sea blessings, often involving spitting into the water or chanting rhymes. Others touched the ship's figurehead or rubbed a lucky coin. One ship required everyone to slap the anchor before boarding the longboats. No one remembered why, but they all did it religiously. And don't even think about starting a voyage on a Friday. It was cursed, always. Even if the weather was perfect, the wind's ideal, and the ship fully stocked. Set sail on a Friday, and you might as well write your will in advance. One ship went out anyway, hit a reef, and had to trade all their silver for mangoes. The mangoes were terrible. There were even rules about dreams. Dream of drowning. Stay off the deck. Dream of fire. Avoid the cannons. Dream of cats that depended on whether the cat was talking. Talking cats were good. Silent ones very bad, especially if they stared at you. Birds had their own set of meanings. Albatrosses were sacred, never harm one. Seagulls could be messengers of the dead. A crow landing on the sail meant someone would soon fall overboard. This became problematic when a crew adopted a crow named Gregory who loved the sails. Everyone tiptoed around him nervously. Even ship colors had symbolism. Black sails meant strength. Red sails meant blood. White sails with a black stripe, confusion. One pirate wore nothing but green and swore it made him invisible during raids. It did not, but people did avoid looking at him. The deeper you go, the more you realize these weren't just quirky beliefs. They were coping mechanisms, ways to handle the unknown, the randomness, the terror of living every day just one rope snap away from disaster. Because at sea, you can't control much. But you can control whether your boots face north when you sleep. You can throw a coin to the sea every full moon. You can glare at bananas like they're cursed fruit from the underworld. And maybe that's enough to keep the ship afloat. So tonight, as the wind hums low and someone quietly hides the offending banana in a sack of onions, you feel it. The weight of belief, the comfort of routine, and the strange salt-stained magic that kept pirates sane when the world around them made no sense at all. The fire crackles low in the iron brazier. It's late, too late for cards, too late even for grog. But no one's gone below deck. The crew is huddled close, eyes flickering with candlelight hanging on every word of a man who isn't even speaking loudly. Just slow, rhythmic, the way all good lies and legends are told. Because tonight you're about to discover one of the greatest pirate traditions of all, propaganda. Not just stories, not just exaggerations, but a deliberate strategic campaign by pirates to become monsters in the minds of every sailor, merchant, and governor across the sea. Yes, pirates knew the power of fear, and more importantly, they knew how to market it. You've already heard about their flags, their superstitions, their threats. But many of those weren't just cultural quirks. They were crafted personas, carefully curated images of terror, and they spread faster than cannonballs. Let's start with the names. No pirate was born Blackbeard or Calico Jack or Black Bart. These were aliases chosen for impact. You weren't going to terrify anyone as Edward or John. But Blackbeard, that conjured dread, especially when you set your own beard on fire during battle. Which, yes, he actually did, with slow-burning fuses tied behind his ears. These names traveled. Merchants whispered them in harbors. Captains passed them between hands like cursed coins. Have you heard of Hornigold? They say Black Bart takes the heads. Calico Jack leaves no witnesses. Were all of these things true? Of course not, but truth wasn't the point. Reputation was. Historians still argue whether some pirate atrocities were real or strategic fabrications. Many believe pirates exaggerated their cruelty on purpose so future targets would surrender faster. If you were known to torture survivors, no one wanted to be a survivor. And if you could avoid a fight altogether by merely being recognized, that saved lives, ammunition, time. So pirates leaned into their images, cultivating fear like modern CEOs cultivate brand loyalty. Only with more blood and fewer press releases. They used symbols on flags, on clothes, on sails. They scrawled threats into letters and left calling cards behind. Some crews carved ominous phrases into captured ships. "We'll be back or night comes with us." One crew left behind a wooden leg with a knife jammed into it. No explanation, just fear. Fringe tidbit. Some pirates staged mock battles in port to build reputation, firing cannons into the sky holding fake duels and roaring threats at invisible enemies. One crew reportedly hired local children to act as screaming victims during their departure from Havana. Performance art? Kind of. Even pirate trials became part of the myth machine. When captured pirates were sentenced to hang, they often used their final words to spin tales. Some begged for mercy. Others laughed. A few recited poetry. One man shouted, "Tell them I took 100 ships and cursed the sea." His known tally 4. But hey, go out big. These last words were recorded, published, and passed around as cautionary tales. Some pirates even requested specific phrases be written on their headstones. One gravestone in Nassau reads simply, "He warned you. Nobody knows who it belongs to." Pirates also controlled their image in tavern lore. Retired raiders, storytellers, and even impersonators spread stories of wild deeds. Some pirates paid bards to sing songs about them in ports. One infamous figure, Captain Mirth, traveled with his own hype crew who spread rumors of his invincibility 2 weeks before he even arrived. And then there were the ghost stories often started by pirates themselves. They'd sink a ship, then send rumors that the crew rose from the sea at night. Or they'd dress in pale clothing and sneak through fog to make victims believe they were being attacked by the dead. One ship covered themselves in flour and shouted in Latin. Their victims fled in terror. The pirates looted the galley and stole 6 pies. Reputation extended to branding off the ship, too. Pirates etched messages into palm trees, left marks on docks, and painted warnings onto buoys. A circle with an X through it meant, "We've been here, move along." An upside-down anchor meant, "Next time, no survivors." Even clothing played a role. Some pirates wore all black. Others favored bright colors, scarlet coats, feathered hats, polished boots to appear flamboyant and dangerous. One crew mandated a battle scarf not for protection, but because it made them easier to identify in a raid. If you saw a red scarf, you knew who it was. And when governments caught on, they panicked. Pamphlets, posters, and official decrees began to spread across Europe and the Americas, desperately warning citizens, merchants, and sailors to beware. Pirates on the rise, children kidnapped at sea, Barbary beasts. The authorities had unwittingly joined the PR campaign. The result, fear did half the work. Some merchants surrendered before the first cannon fired. Others rerouted entirely, costing governments millions. One ship turned back simply after spotting a stick with a hat on it bobbing in the water. They were sure it was a lookout for a ghost crew. It wasn't. It was just Jenkins again, but the myth worked. And even today, centuries later, the branding still works. You know the Jolly Roger. You've heard of Blackbeard. You've seen the skull tattoos, the scarred eyes, the sea-worn coats. They may be gone, but their storytelling strategy lives on. Because pirates didn't just steal gold. They stole fear. They monetized mystery. And they understood one essential truth. If you can make someone afraid of your name, you've already won. The ship is still now. The lanterns glow low, casting golden halos on the wooden beams. The crew speaks in hushed tones, if at all. It's the kind of night where even the sea seems to hold its breath. Because tonight someone died, and that means more than a body in the sea. It means last words whispered across salt-cracked lips. It means stories traded like coins. And for some it means something far stranger, ghosts, curses, and the lingering idea that no pirate ever truly vanishes. Tonight you explore the final, often chilling chapter of pirate tradition, the death rituals, last utterances, and spectral legacies of those who sailed under the black flag. Let's begin with something oddly tender pirate last words. These weren't always dramatic, though many tried. Some were funny, some defiant, some were whispered only to parrots, cats, or no one at all. The last words of Stede Bonnet, the so-called gentleman pirate, were supposedly, "I am not what I was made to be." He was hanged shortly afterward. Whether he meant a reflection on fate or just a dig at bad career planning, we'll never know. Blackbeard, always a showman, was said to have been beheaded mid-sentence, his headless body walking 3 steps before collapsing. Probably an exaggeration. But that's the power of a good ending. People remember the myth more than the man. One pirate shouted, "Tell the sea!" I never feared her, then slipped on a wet rope and broke his neck. The crew honored him anyway. They said it was what he would have wanted, even if the sea laughed that night. Historians still argue whether many of these deathbed quotes are real or dramatic fabrications. But real or not, they were passed down, repeated, written into logs, whispered over cards. They became part of the living memory of the ship, and that memory didn't always stay dead. Pirates were wildly superstitious about spirits. Ships were said to carry the ghosts of the unburied. If a man died without proper rites, without a coin for the sea, a hammock to wrap him, or a final toast, his soul might wander the rigging, forever lost between tides. Some ships claimed to be haunted. A flicker of light in the crow's nest, a cold spot near the rudder, the sound of weeping when no one was on watch. One crew believed the whispering wind through the sail was the voice of their lost cook, begging them not to burn the stew. Fringe tidbit pirates believed that if you spoke the true name of a dead crewmate aloud 3 times, you'd wake him. Wake him, not raise him. As in bring his luck, his curse, or his unfinished business. One ship used nicknames exclusively for fear of invoking the wrong soul. There were curses too. Pirates believed that cursed items, jewelry stolen from certain temples' coins, taken from graves maps written in blood, could doom a ship. One crew tossed half their treasure overboard after someone started coughing blood and muttering in their sleep. Was it illness? Was it guilt? The curse didn't care. Some pirates even left curses behind. If you bury me on land, may your sails rot and your rum turn sour. May every coin you took from me weigh your heart into the deep. One pirate requested to be buried with a mirror over his face, so if anyone tried to dig him up, the first thing they'd see was themselves. The man who found that grave supposedly never spoke again. Then there are the legends. The wandering brig crewed by drowned pirates who sail only in fog. The captain with no eyes who appears to those about to betray their crew. The parrot who screams your sins, which, according to tavern tales, still perches on the rigging of sunken wrecks and calls out the names of liars. Even in death, pirates maintained their flair for drama. Some made death requests in their code to be tossed overboard at dawn, to be wrapped in their favorite flag, to have a bottle of rum smashed on the mast in their honor. One requested his parrot be made captain in his place. It lasted 3 days, and some pirates prepared fake deaths. One legend tells of a captain who had his crew stage a burial empty hammock all ceremony so he could vanish. He was spotted years later in a distant port selling shell necklaces under the name Mr. Tibbs. Whether it was him or just a parrot enthusiast with a familiar beard, no one could say. But perhaps the most powerful tradition was silence. After a pirate died, the crew would often go quiet for a day. No music, no brawls. Just the sea and the memory. Even on the wildest ships, this moment was honored, because pirates knew deeply intimately that death came quickly and often without warning. You could share a joke with someone at breakfast, then bury them before sunset. So they made space for grief. They carved names into wood. They passed down stories. They drank in honor, not just habit. They turned ghosts into guides and curses into caution. And in doing so, they kept the dead alive. So now as the candle burns low and the ship rocks you gently in its wooden cradle, you hear the final words drift like mist. He sails on beneath the waves, no anchor to bind him, no storm to stop him, only the endless dark and the stars above. Sleep well, sailor. The sea remembers, and now the sails ease, the wind quiets, and the sea rocks you gently toward stillness. You've wandered through a world of fire and salt, of laughter and fear, of cannon blasts and whispered superstitions. You've seen pirates build floating democracies, sew gold into their sleeves, tattoo maps on their backs, and toast to ghosts they half believed in. You've stood beside them in storm and silence, watched parrots pass judgment, and seen a spoon become a sentence. And as you lie there now, wherever you are, you can let go of the waves. Let the deck beneath your back soften into mattress. Let the ship become a dream. Let the lanterns go out one by one until only the memory of them glows. These pirates, so loud, so wild, so strange, they were human. Brave, foolish, funny, sometimes cruel, but always vivid. They made myths from misery, laughter from lawlessness, and when the world gave them no place, they carved one from salt and plank and sky. So if tonight you dream of rigging and rope, of flags fluttering in wind, of far-off shores and ancient maps, don't be surprised. The sea has a way of following you, and I'll be here with another story for you tomorrow night.